Hello, and welcome to the first official episode of Dr. Candlepun's Lost Podcast. Today's date is September 22nd, 2024, and exactly 20 years ago tonight, the very first episode of Lost premiered. This first episode was merely half of the two-part pilot. The second half aired a week later. Each episode of this podcast will be released on the 20th anniversary of the air date of the Lost episode being discussed. As such, this podcast episode will be specifically focusing on Pilot Part 1. That said, it is worth noting that both parts of the pilot were written and produced together, which is why it is my strong opinion that they should be watched together. For this reason, my co-host and I each watched both parts of the pilot consecutively. And if you are a first-time viewer watching along with us, I highly recommend you do the same. This episode, which features my co-host, will not feature any spoilers beyond the pilot. However, a couple of spoilers regarding Part 2 are included. Due to the amount of discussion my co-host and I ended up having about Pilot Part 1, I will be releasing a separate episode of this podcast, which will feature just me discussing this episode in the context of the completed series, with full spoilers for the entire show. But without further ado, let's begin. Hello, and welcome to Dr. Candlepun's Lost Podcast. I am Christopher Huth, otherwise known as Dr. Candlepun, and with me...
I'm Mike Huth, the medical assistant to Dr. Candlepun.
That's right. All right, so today we are talking about the Lost pilot. I had you watch both parts of the pilot, even though they actually aired a week apart. And because the premise of this podcast is that we're going to release each podcast episode on the 20th anniversary of the episodes we're discussing. That means that right now we're recording the podcast episode for Pilot Part 1. Then immediately after this, we're going to record the episode for Pilot Part 2, but those will be released a week apart. So with all that said, we're going to try and focus on talking about Pilot Part 1. We may or may not go into Pilot Part 2. I do think that if you're listening to this or you're watching this, and you're one of the people that have never seen it before, I think you should probably just watch both parts of the pilot before continuing with this, if you haven't already, because honestly, I think that they go better together. We're only recording it this way because of the format that I've dictated, and I guess we're adhering to. Okay, so with that in mind, you watched Pilot Part 1.
Yes, and
what'd you think?
Again, you're loved it. Have not seen it since the original time I watched it, where I couldn't so much as rewind to see what I might have missed. So you obviously getting a lot deeper into it. I had no idea they got on that island because the plane crashed. So going back and watching that episode, and Jack's coming to, he's in the woods. You're not really sure, what's going on. I mean, I had an idea since I'd seen the commercials for it, but he's starting to come through, and it's all kind of coming back to me, the noise, and as the noise kind of plays in, he's laying there, and it's funny what you remember. Like, he sees Vincent, Walt's dog, and I'm just like, I remember that dog. Did not remember its name was, Vincent right away. And it was like later on in the episode, like I'm writing on my notes, I'm like, Vincent, okay, that's Walt's dog. Got it.
Percentage wise, like if you had to estimate, like how much of it were you like, oh yeah, I totally remember this, and how much of it was like, I don't really remember what's going on with that?
Man, if I'm looking at both pilot episodes, I would say feel pretty good that I'm around 60-65%.
Yeah.
With those. I think as we go, it's going to get less and less, though.
Oh, really?
I think there's going to be pieces that I remember really, really well, and there's going to be other stuff that's just lost in the sauce. I'm gonna not remember that happened. If it seems anything peripheral that I should have picked up on, chances are I missed it.
Gotcha. So the opening sequence, going back to that, it's interesting for me because we talked about this in the orientation episode, but the first episode of Lost I ever saw was like in the middle of season 1. It wasn't until about halfway through season 2 that I went back and watched these earlier episodes. So I didn't see the pilot until I was already like kind of halfway through season 2. So like I remember before the season 2 premiere, they did the recap show recapping season 1, and the way that they showed that recap, I had no idea that the opening sequence was the opening sequence. I assumed that it started with them on the plane and that it showed the plane crash and then they were on the island and it showed all that. And so it wasn't until I went back with the DVDs and saw that I was like, oh, like that's so much more interesting. And I mean, it's such like pilots of a show are supposed to kind of be like a thesis statement of what the series is going to be about. I think this pilot, like the 2 parts of it, are great as that. Like they serve as a great thesis for the show Lost. But just that opening sequence of itself is even that way because it starts off with like, what the fuck's going on? Like it's a dude in the middle of the jungle, and yeah, maybe you saw the commercials and you kind of the plane must have crashed. But yeah, like he pulls out the little vodka bottle. And the dog runs up to him, and it's like, what the fuck? And then there's a shoe in the tree, and it's just he's like, what the fuck is going on? And then all of a sudden, you get the piece of information, the critical part that like makes most of it at least come together as like, oh, like that explains what's going on, and that's what the show is. It brings you all these mysteries and like leaves these little things, and then it'll give you something that completely recontextualizes it, and you're like, oh, it makes sense.
That makes sense. Yeah.
But okay, I mean, so we're moving on into the opening sequence when he's going through the wreckage and all that. That was 20 years ago that they filmed that for network television.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think? Like,
I think if you were watching it and you knew nothing about it, and if you watched that for the first time, like right now, and nobody told you any different, you had no context for when they filmed that, you would go like, oh man, this thing just come out? I mean, it was before its time, if that's the statement I'm looking for. But yeah, I mean, it fits right now. It fits right now. It did not feel like I was watching a show from 20 years ago at all.
No, quality wise, I think it's. I remember at the time, like thinking the show was like so much more impressive than anything I've seen on TV before. I mean, hell, even some of like the violence, like I mean, the guy getting sucked into the I was like, that was way more intense than anything I saw on TV back in the day. Because you remembered it, or just because like, oh, you don't want to?
No, I seem to actually remember my thought process of like, that thing has been making too much noise for way too long, and there's people too close to it. And knowing what I know about those things, somebody's getting sucked through that bad boy.
But I have a vague memory of the first time I saw that, and I feel like I was like, oh fuck, and I don't think it was so much like oh, I didn't expect that somebody. I don't know. Again, for network TV, which I mean back then, I wasn't familiar with HBO, and streaming wasn't around. So I think just for TV in general, for me to see something like that happen, I was like, holy crap.
Definitely seemed gratuitous. Like it didn't have to happen for all the chaos that was going on, for sure.
Well,
like, it's just like a little.
We say gratuitous.
Well, yeah.
I think it's
wrong
effective.
Word.
Yeah.
It
wasn't like blood went spurting out like Quentin Tarantino or
Yeah.
something. But I mean, yeah, it was. It really made an impression on me, and I mean, but getting back to the point, I mean, I really think it holds up. The one like criticism I have of the opening sequence is so at the very end of it when he's getting Claire, that's the pregnant chick. I don't know how much you're remembering names yet.
I'm remembering Claire.
So Claire and Hurley. So Jack goes back to them because the wing's going to collapse, and they run and they dive in the sand, and then like the explosion, the CGI of that, it felt like it feels a little too over the top to me, in my opinion.
Yeah, a little Mission Impossible.
Yeah,
Can I say that?
Well, I don't know. Did you say that because of J.J. Abrams? Do you even know?
Yes. Isn't he Spider-Man? No, never mind.
I'll cut that out.
I was kidding.
No, well, so I can't tell if you're kidding or not. So, like J.J. Abrams was one of the creators of this show.
Yes.
He directed both parts of this pilot, and then he was like co-showrunner for like the first, I want to say 11 episodes, but then he left to go direct Mission Impossible 3.
What's funny about that is, no, I didn't put those two things together because I'm not that intelligent. But I will tell you, I don't remember things like that. I don't remember directors and all that stuff. But when I saw J.J. Abrams' name on that pilot when they were showing, like, that hit me. I was like, oh, duh. Yeah, like I did remember that. And I don't know if it was... and after I started watching and you got involved and we had a conversation, I don't know what it was, but it absolutely stuck with me.
Right.
The whole Mission Impossible thing, that's bonus.
Yeah. Maybe it was rattling around in there subconsciously.
Probably.
But, so I did want to say about J.J. Abrams. So a lot of people, like, when they think Lost, they think J.J. Abrams. And yes, he was one of the co-creators. He was one of three. But, like I said, he left midway through season 1 to go do Mission Impossible 3, and then after that he did Star Trek, and all that's to say, J.J. Abrams, as a creative, beyond season 1, did not have much to do with the show. So a lot of people that didn't like the way the show ended, or even people like me that did, there are a lot of people that attribute the credit or the blame to J.J. Abrams, and like he's really not the one that had anything to do with the show beyond these early days. So after the opening goes in, and then like he's walking around the aftermath of it. Jack is walking around the aftermath of the crash, and that music starts to play. Music's playing throughout the entire opening sequence, but like for me, the music that starts at that point, like that's where I'm kind of like, this is like movie level music, and I mean that's one of the things that is popularly praised about Lost is the music. It's hard to imagine the next part where Jack's walking around the aftermath of it. It's hard to imagine that without music or with different music. Like it's hard to imagine that being as emotional. I mean, I don't know.
Agreed. Agreed for sure. Yeah,
we haven't really talked about like if how emotional you get watching stuff. Like you're kind of a macho dude. From my perspective, at least. So I don't know. Like, do you get emotional when you watch things?
Yeah, and I tell you, like an old person thing. The older I get, I mean, it just I went from all the stuff that might have happened in our lives that you just didn't bother crying about. You're like, oh, this is Tuesday, to like, man, a good commercial will get me now. And so yeah, when I love the idea. And I go back again to my childhood where I would only get those feelings from real life, or if I was deep in a book where I could I could just sense what the person was feeling. And so in more now, but even in Lost, like you just get wrapped up in the emotions of like, man, I mean, I don't know. I've not been in a plane crash and I'm not the hero medic here, but I can feel what Jack's feeling in this moment and so many of the other characters as it went on. But yeah, I mean, those are the best. That's what makes it for me, right? Yeah. That's what keeps me going, especially in lesser movies or lesser shows where it's like you could pretty much guess what's going to happen in the next hour and a half. You're like, well, if I could still get some buy-in on the emotional side of it, then it'll be worth it. So
no, I mean that's why I like storytelling in general, but cinematic storytelling in particular it kind of exercises. It can exercise our empathy if it's done well. And one of the top, out of like the hundreds of reasons I love this show, one of the top ones is the way that it gets you to empathize with the characters. I'll talk about this more in part 2. But like as the show goes on, like you kind of have like this vague idea of who these people are when you meet them in the pilot. But as the show goes on, you kind of learn more and more about them. Even the people you may not like at first, like when you kind of come to understand why they are the way that they are, even if you still don't like them, which may or may not change for you as an individual, but it adds depth to it, and like I said, it exercises your empathy. It's kind of like, okay, well, there you go.
The Asian guy's name,
Jin.
I
don't think they've said it in the pilot, so yeah.
Oh yeah, they probably, because they haven't even spoke an ounce of English yet. That's right.
Yeah,
but to that point, like Jin's a good example of that. Like I, my initial thoughts of Jin are like this domineering turd, like mistreating his wife, like he's treating her like a slave and not like his spouse, and then and I don't even remember how it was revealed that there's a reason that his attitude was such, but I do remember that there was a reason that made me not still appreciate the way he treated her, but understanding his why,
Yep.
you know.
Yep.
And so going back to what we said, the empathy piece, you know, and I'll reference music in movies the same. It's like, it doesn't have to be my story, it doesn't even have to be my beliefs, but I got to feel it, right? Like, you got to make me feel the way you're feeling. And I thought that when there's a show or movie I'm watching where my feelings turn and I have any empathy for what could be the bad guy, if you will, or the bad person, I'm like, oh, well played. Like, that's how you do that, you know? Yeah.
So, in that sequence when Jack's walking around, you remember when he goes up to the fuselage and he's kind of like looking inside it, and the camera's looking at him from inside the fuselage. Did you notice the hand hanging down from the top, the arm?
Oh, I did not.
Okay, well, so I mean, it's like once you see it, maybe I'll pull up a picture of it in a second. But like, I watched the show. I don't know how many. I mean, I watched the pilot probably 12 times at least before I finally noticed that.
Yeah.
And it's like one of those things where when you finally see it, it's like, it's literally in the center of the front. It's so obvious.
It's the only thing you see.
Yeah. And so I don't know. I just wanted to ask if you noticed it, because every time I watch it with somebody, I'm like, oh, did you see the hand? And they're
I
like,
completely didn't. It's like the person in the bear costume with the bouncing basketballs. But
yeah, I know.
But what's your take on why you would miss that? Because I want to say blindly, I was so focused on Jack, his facial expressions, what he was going to do next, what he was feeling, that I probably just missed anything peripheral. Talk about your tunnel vision when you're not really in the emergency. But
that's my guess, is that every time I watched it up until that point, like I was so focused on his, you know, him being distraught by it, and then just imagining what he was seeing, what we definitely don't see on screen. I was just imagining what he was seeing. And I don't know. I just completely missed it. You want to see a picture of it?
Yeah. Wow. There's a lot of arms hanging fuselages. None of them from the show. Don't Google that, folks.
I'll send you a thing of it later. Just because it's just like when you see it, you'll be like, oh, it's so obvious. I missed that. Yeah. Okay, so the characters that you meet in part one, you don't get it really to get to know a lot of the characters until part two. I mean, really, you don't get to know them too well at all.
Sure.
in the pilot, but I guess what I'm trying to ask is, like, what were your opinions just based off the pilot of some of them? Like, if you have any that you feel are worth talking about, do you think any of those opinions are influenced of vague memories of later stuff, or did it feel like first impression?
It's a good question, because I don't recall that my opinion is been impressed upon by future events, right? Because I just don't remember them all. And I do think that some things will come to me fairly easy. But I more recall liking the people I liked and maybe not liking the people I liked almost exactly the same. Almost like I had not seen it. Yeah. So it's like Jack. I'm like, okay, duh, that's your main dude. Yeah, I mean, it's the great character, great actor. Liked everything about him. Hurley, have no particular reason, but like, I almost loved Hurley immediately. I said, oh man, I hope this dude gets sucked through an engine. But liked him. Kate, I really liked Kate, but I was suspicious of her. You know, I don't know.
Why were you suspicious of her? In part one.
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I have no good reason for being suspicious of her, but
so I wonder if that's maybe like in the back of your mind. Well, did you remember that she was the fugitive?
Yeah, I feel like I did. If I didn't right when I met her, then I did before any flashbacks or anything like that, right? But this was more of like an organic feeling that I sensed about her, and I don't know why. I don't know that when I say I was suspicious of her, I was eager to know what her backstory was, because she seemed to be suspicious. You know, like, she seemed to be, you know, hyper cautious for somebody who'd survived a plane crash with other survivors. Like, she was almost about as low-key standoffish as you could be. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird. I mean, like she could literally be the female version of Jack. You know, when you first see her, she like seems that well put together, but then she just almost seemed like she's a little standoffish of being a part of it all. I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh, being a part. Okay, yeah. The standoffish thing I wasn't quite following. You're saying like how she says, "Oh, if you're going after the cockpit, I'm going with you," like that.
Yeah. Like she has the potential to absolutely be that, but almost like she still had this piece about her where she was untrusting. Which again, looking into the future, I can come to see why I probably got that sense about her. But again, that original feeling was pretty organic. That I don't know, she was just suspect to me.
Yeah. Well, I mean that's interesting because it's like, you know, with these early episodes that we're going to be talking about, including the pilot, obviously, I don't really have the first time I watched the pilot, I already knew so many things about all of these characters, and I remember being as young as I was, not even picking up on the fact. I'm going to be talking about this more in upcoming weeks, but like I remember watching these early episodes for the first time and not even realizing that some of these things were supposed to be huge reveals because I already knew them. But yeah, so what I'm trying to say though is that like I can only imagine what I would have thought of Kate the first time I met, like if I had first met her in the pilot. But to me, it doesn't seem like there was anything obvious, at least not in part one. And yeah, maybe we should come back to this when we talk in part two. But I thought they did a good job of making her seem just like a normal person, and you know, and it's funny because you talk about not. Again, this is something that's like, okay, do I want to say certain things for when other things are revealed? I feel like she is very trusting of Jack. With Jack specifically, I feel like she's surprisingly trusting, and I feel like the more you learn about her and how untrusting she normally is, I think that it recontextualizes the way she feels towards Jack right away. In an interesting way, but all that to say, it's just interesting to hear your perspective as kind of a first-time viewer, first-time rewatcher. Okay, well, we can move on from Kate. We'll definitely talk more about her in part two.
Well, I would just add this last part. Like, you know, I don't want to take away from the fact that my professional experience and things like that might lead into that. You know, talk about it with your dad all the time. It's like you think you're really good at reading people and really understanding like kind of the gist of somebody when you meet them, and we're terrible at that, right? Like you can you can be wrong more times than you can be right, but you do sometimes you get a feeling for your intuitions, and so maybe it was more of a professional intuition that I had, that there was more to her, you know, than what met the eye.
Well, so it occurs to me that maybe on a subconscious level you picked up on something, a little detail, that maybe this is what made you suspicious. The very first time you see Kate on screen is when Jack is trying to sew himself up, and he can't reach, and then she walks out of the jungle. Did you notice anything about what she's doing when she walks out of the jungle?
Now I'm going to take a stab at this because I feel like she was messing with her wrists, or you know, something along those lines.
Yeah. When she walks out, she's doing that.
Yeah.
Like she just took them off.
And now
that's
now
where they find the handcuffs.
Yes.
Later. Yeah.
And now that you say that, you know, maybe that was my professional intuition. You know, for the original time that I saw, I was like,
I just feel like we should let people know, when you say professional intuition, you're a former police officer.
Yeah,
you still work in that type of field. Just so people know what you're referring to.
And the funny thing about that is, you think about it though, right? Is like how many shows have you watched where somebody's been taken out of handcuffs, escaped handcuffs? What is the very next thing they do? They literally, I mean, in real life and in cinema, you know, they're typically like, you know, rubbing it does nothing, by the way. I mean, it's already
just feels good to not have anything on there.
Blood flow going on there that's bugging you, but yeah.
So yeah, we can move on from Kate. Was there anybody else in part one? Again, I don't feel like we spent a whole lot of time with a lot of people other than Charlie a little bit.
One thing I think, talking about, and I don't remember their names, but the brother and sister, the sister seems really, kind of full of herself, little silver spoonish type thing. And I remember thinking that they were, husband and wife or boyfriend, girlfriend. And I was thinking like models. That was like the first thing that kind of came to mind.
Yeah.
But oddly enough, the first time I recall seeing him, and I just watched this again, the first time I recall seeing the brother, or what ends up being the brother, is when he's trying to help the guy he's trying to save the one guy, and Jack comes over.
Oh, so Rose, the black woman.
Oh yeah, that's right. Sorry, it's Rose. So he's trying to help Rose. He's trying to help Rose, and I thought it was a very interesting thing about Jack was he was humorous in how inept that he thought this kid was, and almost kind of like taking some jabs at him at first.
Yeah, well, you should give that license back.
Yeah. And so you had that piece about him that's like, man, that's so medical professional. Like, please, like you've watched too many episodes of like, ER or something. But so kind of almost this humorous dig that he takes at him, but then later when he brings up the idea of giving this guy or giving Rose a tracheotomy, he sends him off like you would send off your young child when you're trying to fix a motor, and you just like, you know what, go get me 2 screwdrivers, bring all the screwdrivers you can get. I just thought that was kind of also telling of even in that moment how he could flip that switch and have a good bedside manner, but be caring of the ignorance of this person that might be annoying to him in an emergency situation. But actually, I just thought it's kind of neat,
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where I think that is a right way to read that scene. One of the ways that I perceived it, probably towards my earlier viewings of the pilot, is just like that Jack's being like a smart ass, like, oh, great idea, you go get me a pen, and then Boone's his name.
That's right.
In the shock that he's in is just like, oh, okay, like he just takes it seriously.
Yes.
Because I don't think either of those is more right than the other.
Well, and when Boone brings the pens back, here's another thing, right? Like he brings this like I didn't know which ones. I was like, they're all perfect.
Yeah.
Good job. It's like they just exactly what I needed right now. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, while we're talking about Boone, like I don't know if you caught later in part 1, like Boone's kind of, he's like, oh, like, and you took care of, I don't know if he's asking about the guy with the shrapnel, or the guy with the leg. Boone asked about one of those. He's like, yeah, I got it set. He should be good to go. It was the guy with the leg. I remember now. He's like, yeah, I set the tourniquet and he should be fine now. And Boone's like, oh, okay, cool. Good job. Like, you kind of already see, like, there's some insecurity there in Boone. That, like, he wants to be more like Jack. Like, he wants to be more...
and you also pick that up in his interaction with his what turns out to be his sister, not his wife or girlfriend, but he is magnifying her faults, which they both probably grew up with a greater part of those faults, if you will. But he does not want to be seen. He wants to be seen as anything but that in this situation. And so, I think that's that. Yeah, you nailed it.
Yeah. Well, and backing it up a little bit to where you said that you didn't remember them being brother and sister. That I thought that was interesting too, or that you thought by the way that they were acting that they were husband and wife. That's another example of something where it's like, by the time I watched this pilot, I had already known that they were siblings. So that's another one of those things that even to this day, I don't think I ever thought about, like, oh, would I have picked up on the fact that they were siblings? I've never thought about that until now, and so that's interesting to hear. Yeah. Okay. Any other characters?
Saeed. Because isn't it pilot 1 that you meet Saeed?
You get a little bit of Saeed,
not a lot. They haven't fought yet, right?
That's part 2.
In meeting Saeed or seeing Saeed for the first time, he struck me as, like, again, one of those together guys, right? Like he wasn't up front like Jack, right? But maybe almost a little more, as squared away, as prepared as Jack, maybe more, but more about Saeed than he was about the total picture. And not that he, wasn't focusing on the things he was doing for other people, but he seemed very kind of self-driven or about self, but otherwise just as capable of potentially being, one of the heroes of the plane crash.
You see, the word is eluding me, but he seemed like very like calm and like, okay, well, this is what we need to do.
Yep.
and like very
detail oriented.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't his first plane crash or
yeah,
something.
right, yeah. He's talking about like we need to make the fire built bigger so that they can see the signal fire and stuff. And obviously there's a little bit more of that in part 2, but yeah, they do pretty quickly establish that like this is a guy you kind of want with you if you were like stranded on an island.
If you were one of the survivors, you want this guy to tell you where to build a shelter and whatnot. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of who else. So you just get a little tiny bit of the interaction between the father and son.
I think it was pilot 1 where you realized that Vincent was Walt's dog. I think it's really cool how you didn't realize until pilot 2 that Vincent was Walt's dog.
And folks, this will be the only time that this happens, because in the future, like we're gonna watch one episode and then we're gonna talk about that.
Right. Yeah.
Literally, the pilot is the only time where we're gonna have watched 2 episodes and then try to only talk about one of them. But yeah, hopefully.
But you got a little bit of Walt and his dad, which went by.
I think the only thing you see in part 1 of them, and that's why maybe I shouldn't have even asked about it until part 2. But yeah, like is that first night, the dad's asking the son, Walt, if he's warm enough, and he just kind of like nods, and I think that's it in part 1. I could be wrong.
No, I think you're right, and then the only other person that comes to mind is Johnny Walkabout. What's his name?
Well, you don't. That's the thing. Like you don't know his name yet. If you're watching for the first time, like you may remember it.
Yeah.
But
I clearly don't. But
well, I mean, kind of. His first name is John.
That's right. I was flashing forward to the thing that I wanted. But what struck me, when you first see him, is once again like something doesn't fit. Like you've just survived a plane crash, and old boy's over there like he's been introduced to meditation or something. Like he's living his best life. It's like enjoying the rain. Like he's gonna and again, I did not remember that until I rewatched that, and I literally, I swear to you, I rubbed my eyes because I thought, like, did this just turn into a horror flick? Like, it seemed so, no reference at the time, but going all these years later, all the weird, freaky smiles and facial expressions in horror flicks, that one hit me weird. I was just like, wait, what is that? What happened? Yeah. And then I thought, once again, I probably didn't think that dude was as odd as I think he is right now, just off of that one orange smile, if you will. But
yeah, and again, just having to imagine, because again, I didn't have that experience of watching the pilot as my first introduction to the show, but that's definitely the vibe I get from what they were going for. Was like you kind of meant to be like, what is this dude's deal?
Yeah.
And like again, because there's so many ways you could read that smile, like because at first he is like watching her take the shoes off the dead guy. And he does kind of look like that kind of sucks.
Yeah.
but so then he does that smile, and I think she's kind of unsettled by that. But I mean, you can kind of read it as him like trying to comfort her in this really weird, off-putting way.
Right. Off-putting. That should have been his middle name.
But I think that's the main takeaway of him, like from the pilot, is just like, you're meant to wonder about him. Like, what the fuck is going on?
If this was a horror flick, that dude would be the escape mental patient for sure. Yeah, that was your prelude.
I guess we're gonna get to, probably the bigger headline of the fucking what the fuck's in the jungle. I know that you remember at the very least what it looks like. I don't know if you remember like what it is, like what the explanation for what it is and all that is, without telling me. Yes or no. Like do you remember?
Well, if you don't want me telling you what it looks like,
don't.
Okay, so I feel like yes, I know that.
Well, I know you do because it kind of came up. When we
yes, okay. So I was trying to remember that conversation for when you hushed me. Essentially, I'm a grown man. But yeah, so yeah, I do remember what it looks like. I don't remember anything. Like, it's going to be like a brand new, like, I'm just opening this present when I figure out the gist of why, why behind that.
Yeah.
Because without, again, giving up what it looks like, what I'm seeing in Pilot 1, Pilot 2, I mean, man, my mind was going a million miles a minute waiting to see this thing.
Yeah. I was hoping that was going to be my next question was, do you remember back when you first watched it and you didn't know what it looked like? Like, what in your mind, did you...
I'm close enough to reliving that right now. Although I remember what it looks like, which I don't want to say that was disappointing or whatever, but like, I really think that I was expecting so many different things. Like, I don't think we have the time to get into all the things that I was imagining this thing could be.
Yeah.
Because, well, I don't know how far we want to get. If we want to get the searching and finding the cockpit.
We can, as long as it's part one, we can absolutely.
So when they're going on this hunt for the cockpit because they want to find the transponder. Thank you, Saeed.
Transceiver.
That's what I said. So the transceiver, slightly different. The transponder, kids, Google it. So
I don't really know the difference. I just know the word that gets said.
One spawns and one sieves.
Transponder, I think you track. I don't know. Transceiver broadcast.
Right.
I don't know. I'm going to stop before.
Yeah, maybe. Anyway, something to do with that. So when they're looking for the transceiver in the cockpit, and they find it. Like, I'm just going to get into that whole thing. Love the jump scare of the pilot taking his breath and he's not dead like you thought he was, right?
That one too. I thought you were talking about when they broke open the door and like the co-pilot.
That was pretty. I was looking away and had to check that a second time. But but yeah. So the little jump scare with that, and so then I want to make sure I get these in chronological order. But two things happen that are super telling. Number one, when he starts to talk to him, of course they think they're going for this transceiver, and then that's going to be their saving grace. And this captain then reveals to him that hey, we were off course by, I can't remember if he said 1,000.
He said 1,000,
1,000 miles, and we lost contact with them. And
he said over 1,000. Sorry.
Yeah.
So we were over 1,000.
Over 1,000 miles off course, and essentially breaking the news to him like, I see where you're going with this, but you should know, like, they'll you're talking about a needle in a haystack, right? You're 1,000 air miles off from their last known course. Like, Yeah. I'm not a master of the search party, but I don't think they're getting anywhere close to them anytime soon.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think the idea is that, like, so I think he wasn't trying to, maybe this isn't what you meant, but he's trying to say that we need the transceiver because they're going to be looking for us in the wrong place. And then, so yeah, that's why they need to get it and hope that somebody can hear it.
Can pick that up, yeah.
Okay, sorry.
No, yeah, and so that I thought was like, oh, okay. So the right when you think that they're about to kind of get somewhere, the plot thickens there, and then the noises from the jungle and it starts happening, and then curiosity kills the pilot in this case. It's one of those things like you just don't do. Like again, give it my scary movie history or whatever. Yeah. This dude starts getting curious and sticking his head out. And I'm like, that's a terrible idea. But it's one more thing that's like, oh my goodness, like what did that? And then they start freaking out. They start running. They're being chased. Just that whole scene. I just remember thinking to myself, like, okay, they know something's up now. Like it just re-killed the pilot, right? Then the whole scene that goes after that, where they're just kind of fleeing, and Jack comes up missing, and it just a lot played out in such a small section there of just kind of let early and often the plane crash is about the easiest thing they're gonna face. Like, hey, you survived that. Yeah. Bad news. Yeah. It just seemed like, man, this is getting heavy quick. Yeah. And which if I remember correctly, that was kind of like the big build up for the end of part one of the pilot.
Yeah, part one ends with them looking up in the tree and they see the pilot's body. And it's like, oh, fuck, what did that? Okay, but to back up, because you keep talking about the noises, I did want to read off some of the things that you hear. Like, so the morning after they first hear it and see the trees being knocked down, you can hear people behind Jack talking about the sound. And it's kind of hard to hear what they're saying if you don't have the subtitles on, and I don't know if you did. But I just kind of wanted to read some of the things they were saying that I think, like, if you catch it, it makes it even more like, yeah, what the fuck is that? Like, because to me, like, the first thing that comes to my mind, or at least it did back when I was a teenager, is like, oh, it's a fucking dinosaur. Like, it's fucking Jurassic Park. There's a dinosaur stomping around the jungle. And then, yeah, you're like, okay, well, it can't be that. Like, because that would be just kind of silly. And, like, why would it?
That never crossed my mind.
Really? That's hilarious. I think even in the promo for it, like I said, we both saw the commercials for it, but I didn't start watching it. And I remember in one of the promos, at least I'm pretty sure, like, it kind of insinuated that there was something in the jungle, something big, knocking down the trees. And I remember thinking, oh, it's a dinosaur or something. That's hilarious that it never even crossed your mind. Well, I think Hurley even, like, makes a joke about it in the next episode. He's like, I don't know. We'll get to that. But the point is, you know, I knew it couldn't be that simple because, again, that would be silly. What would be the point of keeping that a mystery for so long? But yes, some of the stuff that they were saying on the beach, Rose, you can hear say that it sounded familiar, and then Shannon, the spoiled rich girl type, says, "Oh, really? It sounds familiar. Like, where are you from?" She says the Bronx. She's from the city. Yeah, it's like, wow, it sounds familiar to somebody from the city. That's interesting. Somebody else says it didn't sound like an animal. Somebody later says it wasn't natural. This is more of a funny thing than it is, like, informative or ominous. Hurley says, "Oh, it could be monkeys," and then you can faintly hear him say, "You know, technically, we don't even know if we're on an island." That would be a twist. Like,
right, yeah, peninsula. Just walk over to the next city.
Yeah. But okay, but specifically with the, like, oh, it sounds familiar to somebody, like, in the city. Like, I mean, you probably don't remember catching any of that.
I actually, now that you said it, I remember that exact conversation. I remember her specifically saying she's from the Bronx. Yeah. And I don't know what my original thought was 20 years ago, but when I just watched the pilot and I now recall hearing that, I remember thinking to myself, like, and I'll just tell you, my sense was I was hearing mechanical. There was something mechanical or machine about it. And so when she said that gave me the ease that, like, okay, well, at least in part, I'm not crazy about what it is that I'm hearing. Like, there is something, what's the other term? The one person said it's not natural. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not a nature noise that's coming from the woods. Like, it sounds like, you know, like somebody opened the back door to a factory or something. Like, there was just something weird about it. Yeah.
To me, like, the sound, I mean, we're not going to get into, like, how they designed the sound and stuff, because it's a combination of a lot of things that they used, and it's not super informative. I mean, I guess it could be if you're thinking about it the right way. I was gonna say it's not, like, it doesn't really clue you in too well on what you're hearing, what you're meant to be hearing in the show. But all that said, I think it sounds like a lot of things to me. There's a lot of different types. I definitely hear the mechanical part. I do hear like a roaring that sounds more like an animal. And then there's like a ticka is what people refer to it as. It's like a clicking almost.
I almost feel like I also heard like a not a warning siren. I don't want to say siren because that seems too shrilly, but more of like a like almost like a submarine,
like a buzzer type.
Buzzer.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
There was just so much going on, and I'm trying to justify all of that with my overwhelming belief that there's something out here that's willing to eat people, and you know, it's like it's just been waiting for its next meal. It was a pretty weird feeling. Yeah, trying to figure that out.
I think the most tantalizing way to, like, hint at the nature of this thing in regards to what it sounds like is the fact that it sounds like all these different sounds and that it sounds familiar
to people.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's it's probably too vague to even be worth saying, but that's my takeaway from it, specifically with the context of what it actually is and how it functions and the nature of it.
And I don't even know, I don't even have the recollection you have of what this thing is, but now that just hit me a totally new way, in the sense that it's trying to seem familiar, almost like that's part of it.
That's not necessarily what I'm saying, but that is an interpretation.
It's just the way it made me feel when you said that. It's maybe that's, it's trying.
That may or may not be what I'm saying.
Right.
That's how I'll phrase it. Just so I won't spoil if you're right or wrong. But I think that's pretty much everything I have for part one. Do you have anything that you feel like we're talking about?
No, because even though I'm looking at my notes, there's a good portion of things that I was going to say that's clearly not pilot one. I'm just bleeding into pilot two.
Yeah.
I think what's funny to me is how much we can talk about pilot one.
Yeah, it's more than I thought.
Not scratch the surface of pilot one. That's I think the amazing part is what you're taking from it, what I've taken from it, and to sit here and have a conversation about it. I feel like I could keep going, and there's probably people that are going to watch this and be like, we didn't bring up the part I was thinking about. It's that's the beauty of it.
That's actually a great point. So I do want to add a bit of a disclaimer onto this, that I am aware that certain things have been talked to death about. For example, this is one example. It's a very common piece of trivia in the Lost fandom that Jack, in one of the earlier stages of writing the show, they intended to kill Jack off. He was meant to be, what happened to the pilot was meant to happen to him, and then it was meant to be this, oh fuck, we thought he was the main character, and then it would have been Kate, basically, was the original idea. But that was so early on. By the time that they were casting for it, they knew that, oh no, this guy's going to be around.
I was going to say, you missed me with that. Don't be killing Jack.
Yeah. Well, so the only reason I'm bringing that up is as an example of something that I feel like it's talked to death about. And so, there are going to be things like that I'm not going to bother to bring up, because I don't want to bore to death people that are much more familiar with the show and that know all these bits of trivia. Now, that's not to say that I won't bring some of those things up. If I think you'll find it really interesting, or if I think it adds some kind of context that I think is beneficial, I guess. The other thing that I am not going to talk about a whole lot, at least not compared to other people, is the behind the scenes stuff. I know I've already kind of explained the J.J. Abrams thing.
Yeah.
My reason for that is the thing I am most interested in, and the thing that I feel I am better equipped to talk about, is the story stuff, the stuff that's actually happening in the show, in the story. A lot of the behind the scenes stuff, I do think some of that's interesting, and I'm sure I'll keep bringing some of that up. But there's so much that we don't actually know about what actually went down. There's so many contradictory accounts of oh, we thought of this here, and then someone else will say, oh, actually, we thought of it here. It's just a lot of that. There's just no way to know, and it doesn't, in my opinion, add a particular context that enriches anything, in my opinion. So all of that's to say, that is not going to be a main focus of what we talk about on this podcast. But that said, if you are watching the video version of this on the YouTube channel, I do have a section on the channel that refers to other YouTube channels that talk about Lost, and I can think of one off the top of my head, Kapunked. He pretty much entirely focuses on the behind the scenes stuff, as far as I know. And then there's another one called Shokas, who I've referred to a lot in my YouTube video series. He talks about both behind the scenes and in the story stuff. So yeah, if we're not scratching that itch for you in this podcast, you can find through my YouTube channel, you can find links to their stuff. But before we finish with Pilot Part 1, we did have one person. So we actually got several. I posted about the podcast on Reddit, and we did get several emails about people that wanted to be involved. I do think that I may have not been super clear in my Reddit post. I think some people were expecting that we would have them on live to talk about their experiences with the show. And to be honest, that didn't even occur to me. I do love that idea, and I would kind of perhaps like to do that towards the end of the season once we've got these episodes backlogged. It may be something that I do one-on-one, so you don't have to worry. Like we don't have to worry about scheduling it.
You're cutting me out already.
Well,
all right.
my thinking with that, I mean, we can try and do it with both of us, especially if they want to talk to you, because I'm sure some of them will. But my concern with it is that, like, you know, your schedule's kind of hard to work around. So if we then try to find something that fits for your schedule and whoever else's schedule, it could be tough.
Yeah.
So that's the reason that I think I might do it one-on-one. Also, if they wanted to talk more spoilery stuff. But yeah, I'm totally open to doing it. We can figure that out down the road. The point is that basically what I meant with the Reddit post and what I meant in our orientation episode is that what I'm hoping that you guys would send in through emails is, you know, you can either type out your experience, you can share whatever insights you feel like sharing in that way, or any questions you want me to like see what his thoughts are, or like if you had thoughts on certain characters at specific points in the series, like, oh, you know we're going to be talking about this episode, and like you remember what your impressions of the story or the characters were at that time, and you want to share that. That's what we're looking for, and that can either be typed out, or if you'd rather send in like a recorded audio message or even a video message. Listeners obviously won't see the video unless they're watching the video version on the YouTube channel. But yeah, if you want to be seen in the video format, yeah, you can absolutely do that as well. Somebody asked me if I wanted to put a time limit on that. I think that would probably be a good idea, but at this point, I don't want to, especially this early. Like I want people to kind of talk about how they found the show and you know, what their initial opinions of it were and what their overall experience of it was like. So I don't really want to, like, right now restrict people. I may have to edit some of those down if they are really long.
If your submission smells like you want to start your own podcast, might be a hair too long.
No, if I do have to cut it down, I assure you it's nothing personal, and yeah, I'll try to keep the essential spirit of what of the story you're telling, or of, you know, the things you're saying or asking. I'll try to keep that intact. Getting back to it, I got a lot of emails following up about the Reddit post, but as of the time that we're actually recording this, only one person has actually sent in like an actual email that we can really get into, and I actually am going to be breaking it up. Like, we're going to do part of it for part one, and then the other part we're going to do for part two.
Like it.
So I'll go ahead and pull up the part relevant to part one. This comes from Ben Ward. He's a long time. He's somebody that I've talked to a lot on the Discord. Yeah, he went ahead and sent us in an email. And in it, he says, "Hi, Chris and Mike. Congrats on the new podcast. I'm looking forward to it. First off, as suggested in your podcast orientation video, my memories of watching Lost for the first time. I live in the UK, United Kingdom.
Oh, okay.
And the pilot was broadcast here in August of 2005. So that was almost a year after it aired here in the States.
Why are we doing this to the UK? What do we do?
Thankfully, the internet was such that no spoilers made their way across the sea, but I was aware it was a big show. There was a huge billboard outside my work for it, and Channel 4 was constantly running an advert for it. A very cool, artsy one of all the main cast in evening wear dancing on a beach in slow motion, set to a Portishead track." So I'm assuming you never saw that, but they actually had that on as a special feature on the season 1 DVD. I believe that's where I have seen it multiple times, and I believe that's where I originally saw it.
There's a couple things that are striking about the opening piece to Ben's email. I'm first reminded that our friends across the pond use the term advert. Now I want to try to create in my mind this memory of that advert, and I don't recall it. I don't think I've seen it, but I don't think it sounds super cool.
I don't think he's expected you to see it, and yeah, the only reason I have is unless I did see it online. I think where I saw it was on the season 1 special features of the DVD.
Seems like a whole different way to tease you into wanting to see Lost.
It's a cool commercial, yeah. It's pretty neat, but yeah. I would agree with his classification of it as artsy.
Yeah, I like it. Well played, Ben.
I was totally hyped up for it, and when I watched the pilot, even on a tiny CRT telly, there's another one for you.
Yeah.
With adverts every 15 minutes.
All right, tell you adverts.
I was blown away. Instant convert. He then has 2 questions, one of which we are going to save for part 2. And the funny thing is, the second question, I don't think you're going to have an answer for because...
I think I'm going to surprise you.
Okay, then let's go ahead.
Make one up.
I think you'll understand why I don't think you're going to answer the second. His second question is, when you're getting other people to watch the show...
This is the second question?
Yeah, the first question is the one I'm saving for part 2.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So yeah, but when you're getting other people to watch the show, how do you introduce it? One thing I do is ask what they know about it already, and if they've absorbed the big misconception, capital B, capital M, then I begrudgingly, because I dislike having to tell them anything, reassure them that it is not the case. Did you understand what he's like talking about with a big? Did you at least understand that he's referring to the fact that there is a common big misconception about the show related to the ending?
Yes.
but do you without saying what it is, do you know what that big misconception is?
I felt like I did, but now no, I don't know that I do. I think I do, but I
you don't remember it in this moment,
right?
Okay,
yeah.
Okay. Well, so then backing it up to the original part again, I don't expect you to have an answer because you've talked about how you have not rewatched the show yourself. So I don't imagine, I could be wrong, I don't imagine that you've like told people like, hey, you should go watch this show. At least not since it ended.
I can tell you this, like, yeah, no, like I'm not standing on any corners. I haven't like sent out messages, chain letters. But let me be the first to say that if Lost comes up, like I'm selling it. Like I'm like if you have not watched it, you'll be a fool if you don't go forward and watch this show. You will feel like an idiot. Like you are an absolute idiot for not watching the show. Yeah.
That's one way to do it.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, so I can answer it a little bit. Although I don't know that my answer is going to be very satisfying because it is very similar to Ben's. A lot of the times it'll come up in the like if Lost comes up, how they perceive the ending. Like if they've never seen the show before, they're like, oh, I've heard the ending sucks, or oh, I heard, and then they'll state what the big misconception is.
It's a good way to get hit.
No, well, actually, when I was younger, I did
fight people about it.
I would get a little bit more angry about it. Not as much at the person, unless they were like a thing that would happen a lot was I would be in a group of people, and there would be somebody that I didn't know very well, and Lost would come up. And then this person would be like, "Oh, don't bother watching it." Like,
okay, yeah. I've got a fully developed brain and bond money. Don't say that to me.
Yeah, and then they would say the thing that's wrong. It's flat out wrong.
Yeah.
The big misconception that Ben's referring to. They would then state that, and then it's like, dude, like, first of all, that's wrong. It's fucked up that you're going around telling people that. I mean, and even if it were right, which it's not. Even if it were right, like, who are you to fucking spoil this for somebody outside of the context of the show? Like, maybe they would have found that an interesting thing in the context of the show. But setting that aside, it is flat out wrong. It's just not even remotely true.
I can't think of a situation where I'd be so tied into my personal opinion that I would spoil, right, the opportunity for somebody who
to take away
arguably might be more intellectually.
Well, I mean, a person that doesn't intellectually get it doesn't necessarily think of it in those terms. And I'm not. That's the thing too. I'm not trying to insult anybody that was under that under the assumption of that. I've explained a little bit in the orientation, like the way the show aired and the way that people watched it more casually. I don't think people are wrong for misunderstanding the ending. What I think is wrong is for people that, like, especially people that didn't even watch every episode, that like kind of fell off the show, but then, it's going to end. I haven't watched it in a few years, but I want to see what was going on, and surely they're going to explain all that in the final fucking hour of the show. So let me tune in for just this one last thing and get the answers that I wanted back in the day. And so a lot of people did that, not realizing that all of those answers they wanted back then were gradually revealed over the course of the series, or in some of the bigger ones, in the last stretch of it. What I'm trying to say is that, like, by the time you got to the final episode, it wasn't about answering those questions. Like, that's not what that was about. So the one reveal of sorts that is in the finale is really only a reveal or a recontextualization of that season specifically. But people that fell off of it and came back just for that last episode assumed that it was revealing or recontextualizing something from the very beginning. Yeah. And so they tuned in for that, and they made an assumption based off the lack of context. And then they're like, oh, well, so this is what was going on the whole time. And then those people went around telling other people, don't bother watching the show. This is what was going on the whole time. And then, so that's a huge part of why the show has the reputation that it does and why the big misconception exists. There is more to it, and I'm sure way in the future when we get to the end of the series, we'll talk more about that. But but the point is, so that was a bit of a tangent, but that's where I would, when I was younger, I would get a little angry. I mean, I never like shouted somebody down in the street.
I bet you did.
but yeah, I would get frustrated about that because it's like, who are you to not experience the show in its full context, and then take that and go around and spread that, and you're robbing all these other people of this experience of watching the show. People that, like me, could have really gotten something out of it. And
right.
It's like, that.
It's safe to say, at best, careless.
Yeah, inconsiderate. There's so many words you could put onto it. Yeah. So as far as like me getting people into the show, depending on how the show comes up with them, like I said, they might be them being, oh, I heard this is what happened, and then right away I'd be like, well, I can't say too much without spoiling what actually happens, but I can tell you for a fact that's not true, which is essentially what Ben says he does. Yeah. And then I'll kind of go into some of the less spoiler reasons why I love the show, some of which I've already talked about, and I'll talk about as we go on. But so I'm not going to get into those right now. But so to answer this question, I'll kind of pitch. I'll kind of ask them what they like, and well, do you like these kind of things, or if I know them well enough and they trust my opinion about things, I'll be like, well, you don't think I would tell you to watch a thing that's really bad. But sometimes they're more of strangers, so I can't really do that. So I'll have to have a more in-depth thing. There is no simple answer to that question. It really has differed every time that I've referred people to the show. But I do. There's a similar aspect to it regarding the big misconception of, like, if it becomes clear to me that they think they know something, I will dispel that. Yes. To finish Ben's email, he finishes that up with, finally, a request. Something that has turned me off of Lost podcasts in the past is that no matter how big of fans the hosts are, they get tired of pointing out the positives of the show after a few episodes and end up dealing wholly in criticisms and nitpicks. Please don't get caught in this net. Good luck with the podcast, and namaste. Ben Ward, candidate number 90.
Ben, you are safe with me.
So I mean, I'm not going to tell you what to do or what not to do, but I can say for myself, as somebody that's seen the show, a big part of what I want to do with this podcast is address a lot of the things that people like to point to and nitpick, and kind of like be like, well, this is why they're wrong to nitpick. Yeah. So I don't think you have anything to worry about.
Light to their darkness.
Yeah. So I don't think they. That's thematic. That's thematically relevant, especially to part 2.
I did something.
Now that's not to say that I don't have criticisms of the show, and that I won't necessarily, voice those. But yeah, I'm, as far as like actual nitpicks, like, a lot of people on certain websites like Lostpedia, it's like this online encyclopedia of lost knowledge and trivia and all that stuff. And like they're there's an article on every episode of Lost, and in every one of those articles there's a section that talks about like bloopers and continuity errors, and like, oh, that's the wrong type of plane for what it's supposed to be.
Ooh.
Yeah, and again, I'm not trying to disparage this. I get that people are interested in that type of thing, and they're interested in that stuff. I was just like, for me, that takes me out of the experience, and I
Yeah.
don't feel the need to like point that out to people that don't already notice it. So yeah, stuff like that. That's another example of stuff that we're not even going to bring up or talk about.
Right.
But there are other things like nitpicks of like, oh, well, this is a plot hole because of this thing that happens later, and it contradicts this. And a lot of those are just flat out wrong. Like, they're just not thinking. Like, they're not thinking it all the way through, and stuff like that are the type of nitpicks that I actually want to point out and then address and actually counter. So yeah, I think you will be satisfied in that regard, Ben. I certainly hope so. Okay, so I think that's everything we have for part 1. Once again, if you guys would like to submit any kind of feedback about the podcast or about the show itself, share your experiences, your thoughts, your opinions, your theories, any of that stuff, you can be spoilery with it if you want to. I will be the one that goes through the email, and if it's too spoilery, I'll address that part by myself. But yeah, please send those in. You can send it written, send it recorded audio, send it as a video. We will absolutely at least do our best to get it on the podcast. And then for those of you that want to be on the podcast live, that's actually super flattering. And in the future, I would actually like to try and make that happen. But yeah, for now, that's kind of what I'm hoping you guys will email in. As always, that email is dr.candlepun@gmail.com. And yeah, I think that's it.
Bye, Pilot 1.
But all right, we hope you guys will come back next week for Pilot Part 2. I would now like to give a special thank you to the currently active donors. These include candidate number 90, Ben Ward, candidate number 108, Jeffrey Winslow, candidate number 69, Brian Phillips, candidate number 32, Chuck Boyd, and candidate number 341, Hans. If you too would like to become a candidate, you can do so for as little as $1. One-time or recurring donations can be set up on Ko-fi.com/Candlepun or Patreon.com/Candlepun. A donation of any amount will get you credited in this podcast and added to the candidate wall, which will be displayed in all video versions of the episodes of this podcast from that point forward, even once you're no longer donating. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the multiple people that have donated equipment and resources that are used in the production of this podcast. These include Mary Mullins, Brandon Huth, Charles Huth, William McMahon, and Charlene McMahon. Until next time, namaste and good luck. Hello, I am Christopher Huth, otherwise known as Dr. Candlepun.
I'm Uncle Mike. That's stupid.
To like this video, click the thumbs up. Or, if there has been an incursion by the hostiles, click the thumbs down. To leave feedback, enter a comment below. To be notified when more videos arrive, click the circle and then select the notification bell. To view previous content from this channel, click either of the two boxes.